Hello listeners everywhere. Welcome to the Archive of Audio Antiquities, a voyage into the vaults of wonders on the wireless. In a moment, Simon Exton and Ken Moss will be here to speak to you.
Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome back to the Archive of Audio Antiquities. Thank you for paying us a visit. I'm Ken Moss.
I'm Simon Exton.
This time we are listening to the 1967 BBC's television soundtrack of Doctor Who, The Evil of the Daleks. The TARDIS has been stolen. Marooned on Earth in the year 1966, the Doctor and Jamie set off to find the missing time machine. Their investigations bring them to a mysterious London antique shop, where all the antiques seem to be brand new. Kidnapped by the shop's owner, the Doctor is then brought face to face with a very old enemy, the Daleks. Working from a house in Victorian England, the Daleks have a new master plan to conquer the universe, and in order to carry it out, they need the Doctor's help.
We are all of us the victims of a higher power, a power more evil and more terrible than the human brain can imagine.
Creatures burst out of the cabinet, invaded the house. They've taken my daughter, Victoria. They ordered me to steal a box belonging to you, and thus lure you into a trap and transport you here.
What do they call these creatures?
Doctor! Do whatever it is they ask, I beg of you. My daughter's life is in your hands.
We have your time ship. We will destroy it unless you help us with an experiment.
What experiment?
Do not question.
I will not be your slave!
Doctor, I beg you.
For pity's sake, let me go!
Speak when you are told to speak. Where is your companion? He is the human being who is to be tested. Obey the Daleks. You are in our power.
This is the mostly missing ninth and final serial of the fourth season of Doctor Who, originally aired in 7 parts from the 20th of May to the 1st of July 1967, and starring Patrick Troughton as the second Doctor.
And Jamie McCrimmon.
And James Robert McCrimmon, yes, Fraser Hines, away in his time machine. I have to admit before we start, I don't really know this story very well. What about you?
It's not one I tend to go back to. I've always found it a little bit patchy. The beginning of it I find a little dull. Now, to be fair, once the action ramps up and they get to Skaro, it crackles along apace. Kind of. And I'll come to that when we come to the later episodes. No, actually, I'll come to it now because there's no great drama or anything about it. The problem I have with the later episodes is that you look at the telesnaps and they're very, very visual. And it sounds very visual in the way that Web of Fear 4 did, in that they're not that interesting from an audio perspective because there's so much action and special effects going on. So without the existing episode, they come across as a little dull.
Have to echo that. I've never really noticed before some of these soundtracks, and to give a little bit of context, this is a CD release of the soundtrack of Evil of the Daleks. Most of it is missing. There's only episode 2 survives in the archives. The rest of it was recorded off air and has been nicely cleaned up by the audio god that is Mark Ayres and released on CD.
And episode 2 isn't the greatest quality episode, is it?
It isn't. To me, episode 2 is always played like an episode 1. Episode 1 is like part 7 of the Faceless Ones.
No, I mean in terms of picture quality, because it was recovered at the same time as Faceless Ones 3, and they're both in fairly ropey condition.
I can't say that I've ever found it that bad to look at, but it's been a while. I think the last time I watched it was with you a couple of years ago when we just fancied doing a commentary for a laugh.
But there's been a lot of clear up between then and when it was first returned. Okay, it wasn't in as bad a condition as Faceless Ones 3, because there are a couple of jumps in Faceless Ones 3 where the film was too damaged.
Yeah, again, for context, we have not reviewed or even looked at for this the animated Blu-ray from 2021, because we're reviewing this purely as an audio. I've got it very kindly. You've sent me the one that arrived damaged in the post, the tin set. But it's been a few years since I've watched it. Is part 2 cleaned up nicely then?
Yes.
Yeah. And rightly so. These deserve the love that they get.
Yeah.
But the one thing I have found with this is and I've only felt it with a couple of the TV soundtracks, if I'm honest. It's a very, very visual story. I really had to concentrate for a couple of these.
Particularly the Skaro segments.
Do you know, it wasn't the Skaro stuff that gave me the problem. It was, I mean, a lot of episodes 3 and 4 are Jamie and Kemmel wandering around a series of traps as part of the tests to extract the human factor and find out what makes humans tick.
Yeah, but at least you have a little bit of visual reference for the Victorian era stuff because of the surviving material from episode 2. Whereas the Skaro stuff, other than telesnaps and a very tiny bit of the model stuff, there really isn't anything for you to get your hand on. So all of the stuff in the Emperor's Chamber and the Dalek Civil War and stuff, that looks to have been very visual. So this kind of falls apart when it comes to just taking the audio from what is probably a pretty good story. Now, it's patchy, but, you know, there have been other patchy stories. So Master Plan was all over the place. The Chase was all over the place. And in terms of story structure, you've got things like the Keys of Mauritius, which was all over the place. And then this kind of, in a way, it's about 10 years ahead of its time, because when you're getting to the late Pertwee, early Baker stuff, then the structure of a six-parter becomes 4 and then 2 tacked on somewhere else. Seeds of Doom, where you've got your couple of episodes in Antarctic and then all the action shifts. Or you've got Mutants, where it all just suddenly shifts down to Solos from having been... No, actually, Mutants isn't a great example. Time Monster, where it's all on Earth and then for the final couple of episodes you're in Atlantis with a different recording block, or Sharda, where it shifts away from Cambridge to Sharda. And that kind of had a feel of this, where you've got all the episode 1 in the 60s. I love contemporary Doctor Who, and particularly 60s contemporary Doctor Who when it happens, but that whole episode just seems a little pointless.
There's quite a bit of extraneous stuff in this. I mean, the one thing that I noticed was there's a few characters who are really... What are they there for?
Yeah, a lot of the Victorian characters. So Terrell as the Dalek agent, not a huge deal of point, because, you know, the Daleks pulling strings from behind the scenes, they're doing that through Maxtable and Waterfield anyway, so you don't need Terrell. Ruth doesn't really do very much. Molly is there to giggle in a carry-on style.
Toby, even Windsor Davis, is only there to give Kemmel somebody to threaten and then steals a few candlesticks and he's off.
Well, then he's dead, and it does show how deadly the Daleks are. So he kind of has a useful narrative role, because Jamie hasn't met the Daleks before at this point.
No.
So needs to know how deadly they are. The other thing I thought had a very modern take on it was the big argument between Jamie and the Doctor. Jamie not blindly trusting the Doctor. If you've done anything to endanger Victoria, this is our friendship over, and words to that extent. And we don't really see that sort of thing again until Tegan, and it's really properly explored with the stroppiness of Donna. But that kind of character development, the only other time I can think of it in the 60s is when Barbara shouts at the first Doctor, and you should be going down on your knees and thanking us, but gratitude's the last thing you'll have, or any kind of common sense anyway, you stupid old man.
Not that you can quote it verbatim or anything.
I don't think that's quite verbatim, because there's also you would have died in the Dalek City if it wasn't for us bit. But it's not terribly far off. So it's not often that you get the companions being anything other than 300% loyal to the Doctor at this point. And the testing of Jamie, you don't see that again until Curse of Fenric, do you?
Leela, Invasion of Time.
Oh, yes.
But otherwise, not really. No, I can't think of anything where they're so willfully engineered. So,
yes, it's an interesting story that tends to get overlooked in that season, because, you know, I think of that season as the Ben and Polly season. And then you have that Victoria story tacked on at the end. And being such a big fan of Ben and Polly, I would always watch one of the other stories. It's like I tend to forget about the Highlanders, because that's a bit of a low point in the season as well. And it's probably unfair to both stories.
Yeah, The Highlanders is another one that I'm not intimately familiar with. And I suspect, because that is on the list to do, I suspect I'll quite enjoy it. However, Evil unfortunately suffers from comparison with Power. They're both incredibly in the same season, but they're worlds apart for me.
Yeah, and of the two, Power is the less typical 60s Dalek story. Because evil and dotting about backwards and forwards in time and camp nonsense plans is very Chase master plan. Power's kind of more going back to the original Dalek serial.
Yeah.
But by this stage, things had moved on from then, so Power is pretty much the outlier.
Interesting to note that in the 30th anniversary Doctor Who poll for Dreamwatch Bulletin, this was voted the best ever Doctor Who story. You
know, when I was a baby Doctor Who fan back in the 80s, evil was better regarded than Power.
Oh, I can imagine. It doesn't surprise me that that is the case.
Because, without any of the soundtracks or any of the telesnaps and not having a novel, then Daleks trying to clone themselves on a human colony isn't as exciting as Daleks running about with time travel and the Emperor Dalek turning up and going back to Skaro and the big dramatic confrontation in the Emperor's chambers. And the thing that really used to sort of encapsulate everybody's thoughts about evil was the still images we had of the Emperor Dalek, because there's nothing the equivalent of that in Power. There's no massive dramatic image. Now, once we got the soundtrack, once we got telesnaps, you realise that Power is the better story, but it took getting that more detailed knowledge of the programme.
See, this is why I think we're so lucky as Who fans, because as time wears on, the more we know about the less we have. We now know about fragments of found footage that were shot on a cine camera in somebody's living room. Who did it, what day it was, who was in the room with them. And back in the 90s, which was less than half the time between transmission and now, we knew bugger all. I've just found a little snippet of trivia here that Denise Buckley was cast in the role of Victoria, and the production team, hoping that Pauline Collins would carry on as Samantha Briggs, they had Victoria as a backup should Collins decline. However, Denise Buckley was paid but released, with Deborah Watling stepping in as a more suitable actress. Didn't know that.
Oh, so sort of Georgina Jones.
Remind me.
Georgina Jones from Adam Adamant Lives was
yes.
Was the second actress cast in that part, and there was a whole pilot filmed with a different lead actress, and they felt that she didn't work, so she was paid off, and they reshot with Georgina.
You see, whenever this scenario crops up, I always think of Eric Stoltz in Back to the Future. They filmed quite a lot of the film. I don't think it was quite half, but it wasn't so far off. When they'd always wanted Michael J. Fox and then he became free, they paid off Eric Stoltz and refilmed the whole lot with Michael J. Fox.
Yeah, but Hollywood budget can do that.
Oh, I don't know. It was bloody expensive to do. The producers didn't get many brownie points for that.
Yeah, but compare that to Verity Lambert reshooting the first episode of Doctor Who, which would be the equivalent. Actually, it's Verity Lambert who would have reshot the first episode of Adam Adamant, wouldn't it be?
Yes, it would, thinking about it, yeah.
Except that she would be in the decision-making seat at that point, whereas she was dependent on Sydney Newman for Doctor Who. Anyway, what I've realised we're doing is we are describing this as a television programme, and we're not experiencing it as a television programme. We're experiencing it as an audio drama. And as an audio drama, I think it falls apart. We saw this a bit with the Space Pirates. No matter how good the linking narration is, and it's very good, there are times it doesn't cover up for the fact that there's very little audio stuff going on in the background. This particularly in episodes 6 and 7 in the Dalek City, there's lots of what would be special effects and battle sequences that no matter how good your linking narration is, doesn't fully get across.
I have to agree. In Doctor Who fan terms, we know what the antique shop looks like. We know what the Dalek Emperor's room looks like. So we've got a vague handle. We know what the Victorian parlour and the laboratory look like. So we have a vague advantage over people listening to this cold. It's a very visual story. I'm not sure as an audio story. I mean, thank God we've got it. Can you imagine? The Lincoln narration is excellent, as always, read by Fraser Hines. So it does paint a good picture, but it's not the strongest. There are far better television soundtracks with narration that cast a better picture than this one does. It's not the fault of anybody. This was made for TV, but as an audio experience, it's not up there with the best. Now, as a comparison, I've been listening to The Complete Fawlty Towers on CD with linking narration by Andrew Sachs as Manuel. And it works beautifully. Again, part of that will be because I'm intimately familiar with the hotel set. But the vocals, the dialogue, it all speaks for itself. It's all really that the set is very much incidental. It's all done in the dialogue. With Evil of the Daleks, a lot of it relies on the set to build the scene. It's not within the dialogue. And that's the difference.
With Fawlty Towers, there must be a big reliance on your memory as well, because there's a lot of slapstick stuff, the silly walk and the moose head falling off, and
all of that is described very nicely by Andrew Sachs as Manuel. He's reprised his role.
Yeah, but you can't get beyond the fact that you already know what it looks like.
That is true. That's absolutely true, but it works a lot better on audio than the Doctor Who's. For example, I've listened to the Horror of Fang Rock and Destiny of the Daleks audio soundtracks with narration. I know what both of those look like. Horror works better because it's a very talky story. But Destiny of the Daleks, you cannot get away from the fact it's a TV story. And it doesn't quite come across. So something like Yes, Minister, which, and I've never understood this, the whole lot were, or a lot of them were recreated verbatim for radio. There was no trims to the dialogue at all, or very, very few. And because you're basically sitting around in offices and drawing rooms and, gentlemen's clubs and things, the dialogue does all the work. You're entirely there. Now, I know that series inside out as well, but you're right there. The dialogue does all the heavy lifting. The sets are completely incidental.
Yeah, and that makes a lot more sense than the Fawlty Towers, because the Fawlty Towers, like I said, there is a lot of slapstick.
Strangely, it works with the linking narration. Obviously not quite as well as watching it visually, but it does bizarrely work. So I just think, I don't know whether we're being unfair, because we aren't. We're listening to an audio release. It was very specifically put out as an audio release. But I do think we are very much missing something by not seeing the visuals here. 10 out of 10, though. We're very well served as Doctor Who fans, particularly during this period where late 90s, early 2000s, they were cleaning up all the audio recordings, and we are lucky enough to have audio recordings of everything that's missing, put out, cleaned up by Mark Ayres, linking material by, I think it was Sue Malden who did the linking material for a lot of them. The original actors doing the linking narration, and they all do it very well. Annika Wills is still my favourite.
Well, she just has the most gorgeous voice to listen to.
Oh, she does. It's liquid silk. It's beautiful. So we're very lucky, but this one in particular does suffer, unfortunately.
Yes, and it's one where I would love to see. I mean, there isn't a missing Doctor Who story that I wouldn't love to see, even Celestial Toymaker, but this is one I would really, really like to see.
Sooner or later we're going to have to get around to that. But not for a long, long, long time. Shall we rate this in earworms?
This is the song that never ends. Yes, it goes on and on, my friends.
What are you thinking?
I'm rating it as an audio drama. And with all of the caveats that we've put in, I'm still rating it as an audio drama.
Yeah.
6.
Yeah. See, I'm now duty bound, given last month. I gave 8 to It Sticks Out Half a Mile, despite me not thinking it very well written. I don't think this is a very good audio experience, but bloody hell, I ripped through it. I didn't want to get out of the car while I was listening to it, because I was captivated. I wanted to know what was going on. It's a very difficult one to rate. I really enjoyed it, but it's very visual. What do I give it?
I mean, you're going to be kinder to it than I have been.
No, I'm not. I'm going to give it a 6 as well, because we're reviewing this as an audio experience, and it doesn't translate. It doesn't do itself the best justice, let's put it that way. So there is now an animation out there. I'm an absolute
which I rather
audiophile.
enjoy.
I've still not seen it all, but I know that I've seen enough of it to know the animation's pretty good, actually. Particularly the TARDIS being driven away. I think that's a great shot.
Oh, it's the Skaro stuff. And if there were episodes of this going to come back, it would be the ones I would love to see are the Skaro episodes.
Yeah, we don't know enough about them. So, yeah, that would be great. And I think that's where it really comes to life. But, yeah, as an audio experience, 6 out of 10. But that's not to denigrate the story. It's just not designed for audio.
And they'll continue singing it forever just because.
What have you got for us to listen to?
I'm going to suggest something else that has some similar aspects.
My name is Mal Fleming. I am here to assist in your passage. Can you remember your name and the circumstances of your death?
This is a podcast that has quite a lot of Victoriana influence in some of its episodes. It does dot around with people from different time periods and is superbly done as an audio drama. And it's the latest podcast from the people who did Archive 81.
Ooh.
It's a podcast called Conversations with Ghosts, and it's all about somebody who works for a historian who works for a cemetery, and his job is to try and help the ghosts to pass on. And other people who work know what he does, and he's not the first one to have had this job, but some of the other employees of the cemetery use his skills at talking to ghosts to get certain bits of information that they need. It is each week there's a different ghost to talk to, but their stories align. There's a Gilded Age parlourmaid who has her episode, and at the end she says, I can't pass over because my mistress is still here. And then a dozen or so episodes down the list, you get the story of her mistress, and then the mistress passes on, leaving the parlourmaid to have the option to pass on or not. It's a really well done series in the way that you would expect Dead Signals to have done. Well worth a listen.
Next month, we are listening to something completely independent. It's the 4 episodes of Space 1889 by Noise Monster. Dr. Exon, what's the background to this?
Space 1889 is a role-playing game. Oh, God, it must be 30-odd years old. The concept is Jules Verne, Victorian era, going into space and finding what there is on Mars and interacting with the Martians and finding out what there is on Venus and the rest of the solar system.
Well, there were 4 70-minute dramas produced between 2005 and 2006. We're going to review all of them. It's been a while, but I think that's going to be an interesting review. Until next time, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you for paying us a visit in the archive. We'll be back very soon. Ta-ta.
Bye now.
The Archive of Audio Antiquities featured Simon Exton and Ken Moss, and the announcer was Jenny at Blue Box 99. All featured soundtracks are the property of their respective producers, and no infringement of copyright is intended. Title music was by Edward White, and the programme was produced by Maverick Productions. For more information, please visit maverickproductionsuk.blogspot.com or find us on social media.